one of the most interesting things we saw this week was actually on the U.S. Iran situation. And this is really for the first time um, in the post February or since the February 28th attacks opened up. And we saw the ceasefire on April 7th, and the attempt to turn this into to move this from a military kind of scope of operations into political diplomacy, um, uh, type of phase for negotiations. Obviously, there's been attempts, and I'll start with this Monday, to prevent that from happening. So, number one, we woke up Monday morning and, you know, the first market headlines when all of us financial professionals logged in and began trading was IRGC attacks UAE's energy export facilities at Fujairah, or the export, port of Fujairah. And we saw the bond market attack where U.S. Treasury yields breached the 5% level for the first time since, I don't know. I'd have to go through and look at it, but it was the first time we'd hit that resistance in a couple of years. Um, Same thing. You got long end rates across pretty much all world bond markets showing that same stress. Notably, if you want to see a chart that looks like it's in pain, go look at the 30-year UK gilt, and that'll tell you, yeah, who's close to the point of tapping out or calling emergency. All right. So you saw that, and the way I read that, so you have the U.S. and Iran closing in on an agreement that will, bring some closure to this phase, so we can move on to, some sort of settlement where both sides work towards some end result that both of them can agree with. And I'd say so. I think it's a 14-point MOU fits on one page. The way I would understand it, right? If you think about the old, framework that was negotiated by the Obama White House back in 2015, but also with the E3 powers, so France, UK, Germany, the JCPOA, that was all like everything is front loaded as far as the agreement. You do it, you comply, and what you're actually kind of getting at is you're trying to get two sides who absolutely mistrust each other to come to some agreement, and it's got to be like you're married right now, shotgun wedding, got to agree to it, and it's very hard to get an optimal deal and something both sides or will stand up to what both sides want. I think in that type of process versus this one currently, and keep in mind, I think the E3 were standing behind the JCPOA. I think it was still technically in effect, and yet now we know IRGC was enriching uranium up to 60%. So I'm not, a stickler for researching the letter of the agreement, but I'm pretty sure that that would have been in violation. But who knows? Like when you're just on the cusp of, you've passed all the hard work to get a nuclear weapon, to push it that far. I'm going to say that was probably outside of the bounds of the original JCPOA, but we'll leave that for the sticklers to decide. All right. Anyway, this new kind of framework that's being set up with the MOU that's on the table as of Wednesday, and markets reacted positively to. It's a 14-point plan, fits on one page. And instead of asking both sides who distrust each other to come in and just, hey, we're going to go from 0 to 1 overnight, sign on the dotted line, it's structured as a phased process where say, hey, you have 30 days here to start doing this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And it's just an agreement that, hey, we're going to build on this in a series of steps over an elongated period of time, so that, trust, instead of going from none to full and asking to go in one big cliff up, which is really hard to do, it's built on like a series of small steps and ultimately, working towards getting to that end game. And I think if we're talking about this big regional mess, right, that extends beyond Iran, as kind of we're illustrating with everything we talked about before, um, that seems like an approach that can work if everybody can be, and instead of pushing each other further and taking actions that aggravate, competing interests, and and only at the end of the day further us along on that process of walking up to that line of full brinksmanship and war that usually doesn't end well. Um, Taking this process on a step that has like little steps by steps, and then we get to that resolution we want, and we don't have to resort to broader war, full you know fifth generation warfare, all of that. It seems like a much more ideal outcome in my point of view, but I don't know, call me biased, right? All right. So this week in Iran, you saw that development towards a peace process, and then we saw some camps were trying to sabotage it. I think the thing I found most interesting was this was really the first time that China put its thumb on the scales, pushing the IRGC towards what I just described as the outcome, the build trust outcome that hopefully ends in a durable and lasting peace, right? And so if you think about this from the standpoint of these old Silk Roads, um, think about both of these actions, what we saw from the EU going into Armenia, and then China influencing the U.S. Iran negotiations and progress. Think about that as the two endpoints of the new Silk Road trade routes, um, spanning from East Asia all the way to the west end of the European peninsula. The way I view this, you've got both sides now, uh, the with their political weight, economic weight, pushing for influence over that process, over the trade routes. And if you think about land-based trade, um, you have to, like, your goods are going to be marked up at every kind of political endpoint, every checkpoint, on every toll booth on the mile marker. So the more you bring in each of those into your orbit and align their economic interests or align them into your currency system, whether it's the euro or the Chinese yuan or renminbi, um, that's going to influence in the big picture end game once the trade is just growing and ramping up over the course of the 21st century, through these new corridors. It's gonna tell you who captures more of the value on that land-based trade franchise. So that's what's at stake here. So China, both inserting itself into the process with the IRGC, saying, "Guys, cool it." Like, talk about the attack on Fujairah, all of that. They're basically telling them, "Knock it off," um, politely. And then also you saw another step where um, uh, Chinese financial regulators gave a verbal directive to its banks not to extend loans to specific Chinese refineries that were known to be purchasing sanctioned Iranian oil, right? And kind of this just goes to show when we say a name like Iran, right? It's not a monolith. There's different political factions vying for, control of, at the governance layer itself, or you could say the economic layer or the financial system, all of that. There's different power factions in a country like Iran, which we highlight with the differentiation between the civilian government or civilian military and the IRGC per se. But you see the same thing showing up in China, and this little bit I highlighted here at the bottom of the Bloomberg article. Um, the the directive to stop new loans or pause new loans to this U.S. sanctioned refiner, uh, Contrasts with a notice put out like 4 days earlier on May 2nd from China's Ministry of Commerce, which instructed companies to disregard the U.S. sanctions. So you're told by two separate bodies within China itself two different things. And it just goes to show, like in each of these countries themselves, or nation states, or just kind of broader spheres, internal competition and power struggles going on as well. But point is, from this one, we saw kind of, some power faction in China was able or felt it, the risk was low enough or mitigated to poke their heads up and push this action through and instruct. Really what it's doing is saying, hey, it is amounting to the same. It's the winds are blowing in the same direction as, say, the U.S. blockade of Iranian oil tankers exporting oil onto the global markets. So they're working in this is, I would say, cooperatively with the U.S. Treasury and Department of War's approach as we're in this post-military phase of resolving the Iran quagmire that we've been in for like our entire lifetimes, essentially, right? Okay. And so you're starting to see some interesting other developments as well. Okay, so before I'll get there, China presses Iran against resuming war. All right, so they're saying knock it off. That's what I was just saying. This is a CNBC article. And also went on record urging the Hormuz reopening ahead of this Trump-Xi summit, which is, a couple of weeks around the corner. The large aircrafts were already landing with the supplies, all of that to prepare, all the things necessary for this state contingency to arrive and hold the U.S. China summit here in the next couple of weeks. All right, and then the last one. This is within the last hour. Well, someone said they saw those warnings, not just from the U.S. but also coming from China in the Hormuz, and blatantly, like, I guess I think of a right term here, Karen, but like spit in the face of exactly that. A Chinese oil tanker was attacked in the Strait of Hormuz, which is like, this is no accident. You did this on purpose at this point. So there's going to be repercussions. This is escalatory. I'm hopeful that kind of peace process or some sort of negotiation can come to a successful conclusion. But at this point, even when a mega power like China has become puts their thumb on the scale and weighs in on the process, and you still say no, sometimes that's just dumb. It's like a dog biting its master's hand, and if you do that enough, well, don't be surprised if you have to be put down.